Okay, so I am here to share my teen mania experience. I have been hesitant to share about this in my life, even with close people, um, family, therapists, let alone publicly like this, because I really doubted myself and my experience. But recently, I don't know if you've come across the show Shiny Happy People. They came out with a season two, and the first episode is like 30 seconds in, they're like, Teen Mania. And I was like, oh shit, here we go. Right. So I have PTSD from a lot of different things in my life, but most of it is complex PTSD. So stuff that happened chronically over time. I had three brain injuries as a little baby. So those were like acute PTSD experiences. Um, but then I have a whole lot of just like chronic stuff. But this experience with teen mania was another acute case of PTSD and was the most like fitting the criteria of PTSD experience that I have in my life. And now I know that I did not make it up, that that was not just yeah, it was definitely real what I experienced. So I was connected with Teen Mania through a high school friend. I growing up from fourth grade until 12th grade, went to a Baptist school called Santa Fe Christian. It's in San Diego, California, and I was also connected with or attended with my family Solana Beach Presbyterian Church, and both of them had the like 80s, 90s, 2000s evangelical Christianity vibe. So there was a really big push, which you can learn about on Shiny Happy People, both season one and two. There was a really big push to kind of um, create a generation of Christians who would be soldiers to go out and change the political landscape of America specifically. And that was language that was used. It wasn't like a secret agenda. And there were, we were being trained to go and share this specific message in order to save people's lives from hell. So there was a real big like concept of hell was the thing that we were trying to escape. And my parents connected through an organization called Young Life when they were like in the 70s, when they were in their early 20s. And this organization, Young Life, was I think originated in Southern California and was a part of this sort of like Jesus hippie movement that led to the Calvary chapels, the mega churches, the James Dobson's focus on the family kind of stuff that I was raised in. So for them, like for all people that connect with religious groups that are very like high demand or very dogmatic or cult-like, whichever language you like to use. It was a group that offered them safety in many ways. It offered them belonging. It offered them really clear rules. It offered them this shiny, happy um, sort of veneer that was very appealing for them. Both of them came from families that were decidedly not shiny or happy. Both of them experienced poverty, addiction, abuse, and just a lot of instability. And both of them were people that really wanted a beautiful life, a good life, one that was filled with love, one that they could love their children and keep their children safe. And they wanted something better for their adult lives and their children than what they had experienced, which is very human and something that most of us as parents think about. So I admire their courage in finding, seeking out, connecting with, and staying connected to a new way of life than what they had experienced because it was very well intentioned and makes a ton of sense. And these are specifically the kind of young people that these groups sought out. To encourage young people to form, relationships, marriages based in following a certain set of rules, and then to raise children in those rules outside of the public or secular sphere. And to then lead this charge for creating a new America by becoming involved politically and creating a more religious, um, you know, uh, uh, situation where the government would be based in Christianity and these evangelical Christian thought. So, my parents got involved with Young Life when they were at a vulnerable stage of life and then connected to each other and started their life together through that framework. And that connected them with a church. And they became very, very active in the church. And then when they had children, our whole lives were centered around the church. And then very quickly, within a few years, we got taken out of the public schools and connected with the Christian school so that our entire world was under the umbrella of this philosophy. Growing up, I was involved in just church and school pretty much. I was involved with ballet and tap, which was outside of school. But that ended, sort of at the end of elementary, and I became very involved with the theater group that was housed at our school that was called Christian Youth Theater. So very quickly, by the time I was 12, I no longer had any connection. Early on when I was still in public school, I was in dance and Girl Scouts, which were both secular, outside of our church community and Christian school community. Once I transferred over to the Christian school and then ended the Girl Scouts and did the dance, I had no more connection with the secular world. So the only people that I interacted with were within the evangelical Christian community. And this is sort of a trademark aspect of being within one of these communities, or if you want to call it cult, because you eliminate all outside thought processes so that there's no way for someone to really like see something that would cause them to question what they're believing. And everything that they're experiencing is reinforcing the thought process. Of the group. So I was at Santa Fe Christian and I was at Solana Beach Presbyterian. Our family was super, super involved. We went every single Sunday to church. I was super motivated in terms of connection to what I would have called my faith at that point from very itty bitty. I see myself as a deeply spiritual person and a mystic. And I think that that part of it was like really compelling to me. And I felt genuinely that I had and have a relationship with Jesus. Now I see it more as the ascended master kind of relationship, because I do believe that Jesus is an entity that had great spiritual insights, or at least is a compilation of spiritual insights that are represented by this idea of Jesus. And I feel a relationship with that still. But I felt it very strongly as a child, deeply believed in the supernatural, the miraculous, felt very connected to martyrs, and recently found out that we do have two martyrs in our ancestry, two folks who were burned at the stake in um, England for opposing the Queen regarding religious concerns. And a lot of folks in our lineage who had, deeply religious beliefs who confronted sort of the state. So this stuff is all in me ancestrally and makes a ton of sense, not just from my one lifetime. So, we were deeply involved in the church. If I needed to stay home sick, I would get out my Bible and I would preach a sermon to my dolls. I would, if the family needed to miss church, I would sit everybody down and I would lead a service. I was involved with the worship team. I, led a girls' Bible study. My mom led the women's Bible study. We were super duper active. So we were there twice a week. My mom taught Sunday school, VBS, and then once we were at the Christian school, our whole life was around this idea of Christianity, right? We went to chapel at school. We started every day with prayer. Um, we memorized Bible verses every single week and had tests on them. Our teachers were from Bible colleges, and so they were not trained secularly, they were trained religiously. So our curriculum was reflective of Christian values. So we didn't have, like, your regular literature access. We only bought books at Christian bookstores, and we didn't listen to secular music. A little bit of secular music in our house because my dad's a real music guy, so that snuck in. But we listened to a lot of Amy Grant, Michael W. Smith, DC Talk, Jars of Clay, Jennifer Knapp, all of them. We watched some secular TV. We weren't allowed to watch Nickelodeon or MTV or those kind of things, but we did watch the Disney Channel, which was controversial in our community. My cousin's family did not watch Disney. So we were like, we were the scandalous family in our extended family because we were a little bit less rigid. If you watch season one of Shiny Happy People, like that framework that the Duggars followed was more what I experienced at school than what I experienced at home. My mom was pretty scandalous because she was in leadership at the church, even though it was initially only with women. She wore pants. She was pretty like stylish, contemporary. And she didn't like make all our food or anything. And she started working at the church when I was in middle school. So she was definitely, like my cousin's family, their opinion was that the reason why I turned out queer is because my mom was so, taking the role of a man by like wearing pants and being in leadership in the church and not just being a stay-at-home mom. So the culture that you saw in the Duggars or in the first season of Shiny Happy People, that is what I experienced at school. Not so much at home, not so much at church. Our church was also considered like very liberal because eventually we did have women pastors. And my mom became a pastor as well. My sister and I went to like half of a Master's of Divinity program. I ended up dropping out. So my world was very, very much informed. Like I said, the music was mostly Christian music. We had some secular influence. We had Disney, which was like a little scandalous. Um, so we would watch like the Disney Sunday Night Family movie. And we had all Christian books. And once we were at the Christian school, our clothes were the Sue Mills uniforms that were, pretty traditional. For at first they were just skirts, but then eventually they did introduce shorts and pants for girls as well. But there was still like a lot of purity culture, all of the um, stuff about what's that guy, Josh, who wrote the book about purity, about like saving yourself for your husband and like courting and a purity ring and like making a commitment to not have sex before marriage. All that stuff was what I grew up on. I had read the Bible 5 times through myself. Like I said, I was super, super into it. I think that in part my queerness was helpful because I wasn't wanting to interact with guys. Um, eh, in the like sexuality way that was being offered to me. And so I think that helped me like be more into purity culture. But I was very into just doing the right thing according to them, following all the rules. I got the most Christ-like award like every single year, fourth through 12th. And I was super into the high achieving aspect of it, into being like the best Christian ever, and I was super into missions. And I think that was sort of like from early on, I wanted to be a part of mercy ships, which were um, kind of like Doctors Without Borders, but with a Christian agenda. So they would send these ships out all over the world and they would have doctors volunteer and they would evangelize. So they would try to convert people and they would offer medical care. And the kids of the missionaries got to be on the boat and would do these musical presentations and they would come and perform at our church to raise money. And I was like so angry at my parents growing up that they would not go as missionaries around the world so that I could go as a missionary kid. I wanted to be an MK just like so, so, so bad. But I think now that that was, mostly about that I am a person who really loves and feels connected to many ways of being on the planet. And so therefore has had like a real interest and a desire to connect with other cultures, other languages. I used to, one of my main question marks in Christianity from a very early age was that I really could not wrap my head around that other kids would be like, they were raised Muslim, for example, and then God's going to be mad at them for not being Christians. And I was told, like, children don't go to hell. So, like, if they just never heard about Jesus, then they get to go to heaven. But if they grow up and they haven't had like the chance to hear about Jesus, then they could go to hell, which is why we were supposed to go out and tell them to actually save them. And so I really connected to that. And I loved service. I loved, like, grew up being in San Diego, going down to Tijuana in Mexico and working at orphanages, volunteering, have so many memories. I really loved being a part of that. And I was very much in like the white savior culture. So got a lot of praise and certificates and positive feedback about being of service and helping others. And so I think it played into something that is beautiful within me, but it was just manipulated. So I came up through all of that, and you know, by the end of high school, I was very clear that I wanted to be in some sort of service. And because I had that sort of framework of like, go change the political landscape for Christ kind of training, I wanted to go into politics. And my senior year of high school, I was accepted into something called Presidential Classroom, which is like a program for young people to connect with politics. And I'm curious now, then I didn't think it was Christian, but it might be. I don't know. But it was very celebrated and supported by my Christian community. And I went and I got to like see all these different things, go to the White House, etc. And there was this idea that I was going to go be a political aide or presidential aide to political aide to the president. That was my dream. And I think it's kind of funny now because it's like I didn't want to be president. Nobody told me I could be president because I was assigned female at birth. So they saw me as a woman and were like, I basically wanted to be like the highest form of secretary within politics, which I think is very interesting. So I went into college kind of not knowing what I was going to do. I really liked politics. I went ahead and took like US history right away. I had only learned biblical, like biblical everything growing up through that Christian school. So I had only learned creation science. I didn't I thought evolution was like stupid and idiotic. I still struggle with it, honestly, because they were so convincing. So I still am like, I maybe evolution, maybe creation, I don't know what, right? Because they like that's still there's a part of me that's like, I don't think evolution, but I get it. I get that science really agrees that evolution. Um, so I didn't learn regular science. I didn't learn regular like literature or politics. I learned it all through like a Bible lens. So we took like church history for our history, etc. Um, so I ended up going to a secular college, and I don't really know how that happened. My sister ended up going to UC Santa Barbara, and like I'm not sure. I think what happened was we wanted to go to the private colleges like Point Loma Nazarene and Westmont in Santa Barbara. But their tuition was super high, and my dad was like, "We can't afford it." So I remember we went to visit Westmont, and then I think maybe there was an idea that like you could go to UCSB and then you could like go worship and stay connected to the community at Westmont or something. I don't know exactly, but so my sister ended up going to UCSB and she was super involved with something called Campus Crusade for Christ, which I haven't watched the whole season two of Shiny Happy People. I wonder if they talk about it, Crusade, in and I wonder if they talk about like Fellowship of Christian Athletes and some of those other ones, InterVarsity and Young Life that are like all of the same genre. But I know Teen Mania is the more extreme version, but Crusade is pretty extreme. So she got immediately involved in Crusade. Oh, backtrack a moment to my high school youth group where both my sister and I were in leadership. We were both involved with like teaching Bible study, leading Bible study, very, very involved in the youth group. Our youth pastor ended up one or two of the kids in our youth group ended up reporting that they had been sexually involved with the youth pastor. And that's how they framed it, that they had consensual relationships, even though they were underage. So it can't be consensual if you're underage. But that's how it was presented to me. These two girls were the children of the head pastor of our church, Don McCullough, who was, uh, the head pastor of Solana Beach Presbyterian at the time. There was a big like church division because some people well, it was more complicated than just the youth pastor situation. What ended up happening was that the head pastor was the associate pastor reported that the head pastor and her had had sexual relations, and then he ended up like leaving his wife for the secretary who he had also been in relationship with, and it came known that he had known about the youth pastor who was having sexual relationships with his underage daughters and had covered it up in order for the youth pastor to not expose him. So it was this big wild web, and the church had a big division. Half the people left, half the people stayed. That head pastor went and got a new position, became the president of San Francisco Theological Seminary. Like nothing scathed him. The youth pastor went to another church, no problems there. Probably both continued those behaviors. Um, and we were left with like basically my entire youth group followed that youth pastor to the new church because it was just across town. And I was left with like five people who stayed, and we stayed because my family chose to align with those girls. And it was fairly traumatic. And it was my senior year of high school, so it was really rough. And my sister's ex-boyfriend ended up becoming the new youth pastor, and I tried to stay really connected. But I would say that was like also simultaneous with my most severe years of eating disorder behavior, which I left out that around 11 or 12, I realized that I was queer. And I took it on as like this is my cross to bear. This is the thorn in my side, which is a Paul reference. And I thought, like, I just felt honored because I had prayed from the time I was for my entire seventh grade year. I had decided that all the great spiritual leaders and figures and martyrs had had extreme discomfort, that they had been so in so much pain, and that's what strengthened their faith. And I felt like my life had been too cozy, and so I prayed to be made uncomfortable so that it would strengthen my faith. And so I felt like when I realized I was queer, that God had answered my prayers, and that this was going to be like my cross to bear for Christ, and it would be a way to like really prove my dedication and love for God. And so that's sort of how I was moving with my queerness through high school, but it had really taken a toll. And I think that's part of what the eating disorder stuff was about. There's also like so much pressure around physical appearance in that community, especially, influenced by white supremacy and women as objects, and so many different layers. And so there was even like disordered eating within my family of origin, and pressure to be thin, being weighed, being told we couldn't have bigger clothes if we gained weight, etc. So there was a lot of that. And that senior year was just sort of like an explosion of all of those things. So I went off to college on the heels of all of that. So I was already pretty shaky. I got immediately involved in Campus Crusade for Christ because that's what my sister was involved with. I became the MC of our large group meetings, which was like 350 kids, college kids coming together every week. And I would stand in front of them and, run the show and crack jokes and tell stories. And I was leading girls' Bible study right off the bat, even though that wasn't common for first years. I was plugged right into a Bible study and connected with a crusade leader that was all kids who were older than me, um, who were seniors. Seniors? Seniors, I think. Juniors? I think juniors. And so they were all getting ready to go, I think, yeah, they were getting ready to go into their senior year. I was getting ready to go into my sophomore year, and I had been really struggling. I fascinatingly also signed up to be the manager for the women's basketball team. So I was trying to like dip my toe into that queerness, but still stay really super Christian. I, pretty quickly after getting into college, like cut off all my hair and started wearing sweatpants, which is my true fashion sense is pajamas. Um, if you know me, you know that that's all that I wear is sweats and PJs. So I was becoming like more free, but I was also trying to stay in this super, super Christian vibe. All of this is leading to Teen Mania, by the way. I haven't forgotten. Um, so it helps to understand why I connected with Teen Mania. So I'm in Crusade. I'm also like hanging out with all these queer women's basketball players. And I fall like madly in love with my best friend who's on the basketball team, and so I become increasingly suicidal. I almost drop out. So my parents have coordinated like how to transfer me to Point Loma Nazarene so I could come back home and live with them and go to this small Christian college. Um, which I think would have been so interesting if I had taken that path, because my high school crush, she had gone to Point Loma and was playing basketball there. So who knows what the world would have looked like if I had done that. But I ended up rallying. I ended up like staying with a friend off campus who was from my Bible study for a second semester. I had a good experience. I had missed the deadline to get housing on campus. So I ended up just like going to the off-campus housing office, which was really wild, and just like finding a random roommate, which could have gone so horribly. But it was a very cool miracle because living with Maria, who I loved, who was not a Christian. It was the first time since third grade that I had interacted with someone who was not a believer. And I was like, you're awesome. I loved Maria. Maria's like, shout out Maria wherever you are on the planet. She was from Belize. She had this Portuguese, maybe Brazilian boyfriend. They would speak like Portuguese together all the time. She worked at a bakery. She wasn't even in school. She would wear scrubs all the time that she like sewed. She's so my vibe. She's like would be my best friend right now. She would sew like funky like Hawaiian print fabric onto the bottom of her scrubs, and she was like not skinny, not white, just this like amazing, loving, like very embodied, like worked at a bakery, like get up in the morning and bring all these treats home and like ate anything she wanted and was like curvy and delicious and so just like in her body sexually. She'd be like making out with her boyfriend in the living room, and I've never seen anybody like, because in my training, it was like no kissing even before marriage, and then after marriage it's like in the closet, people like peck. um, so she was just open up this whole world for me. And I was like, I adore her. She's fabulous. And I actually feel more loved by her than I have ever felt by any of these people in this Christian world. I felt more immediate intimacy and love and compassion and acceptance and joy and connection with her than I had felt like ever. And so that started something in me that was really powerful. And then what had also happened that year, as I was living with Maria off campus, and everyone was like praying for me and concerned with me because I was living with a non-believer. Um, my sister had a falling out with Campus Crusade. She was a senior and I was a sophomore. And she had something happened with her boyfriend, who was the leader of the worship team, and she was the girls Bible study leader, and they were like the shiniest couple, like, you know, who everybody thought was going to go be the next leaders. Um, and they had some sort of a falling out. He got kicked off the worship team and she got asked to step down from leadership. And I was like, what's happening? And she was telling me, like, they're crazy, they're extreme. I'm not going to be a part of it. And my family was like, yeah, Crusade is done. And so then she was like done with Crusade. And I was like, aren't I supposed to be like super involved with Crusade? What do I do now? I felt very conflicted. My leaders were like, your sister is living in sin. She's like, wouldn't repent, because that's how they would do it. If they decided you were living in sin, you had to come in front of all the other leadership, which is your peers, and confess and repent, and then they would decide if they were going to forgive you and allow you to like continue in leadership. So it was like really dramatic, and she went to this meeting and refused to repent, which now I'm like, yes, bravo. But then I was like, what does this mean? Because my leaders were telling me like she's not repenting and you better watch out, because like if you follow in her footsteps, like you're going off the path of God, and like this is really a problem. And I am the person who is like so devoted, right? My sister was, but like less so. I was like practicing in the mirror after, Columbine, when that girl Cassie like said, like, I believe in God, and got shot. I would stand in front of the mirror in my bathroom and be like, I believe in God, and like be ready to get shot, and like thought that would be fantastic if I could have that experience. I was so devoted and so obsessed and wanted to die for Christ. And so I was really torn. And that same year, that group of friends that I had started hanging out with my freshman year, they were seniors and they were getting ready to go on stint, which in Crusade language means you go away for a year missions trip after college. And they were going to Morocco. And I was taking Arabic as a linguistics major because I ended up getting into linguistics because one of my friends from Crusade was in a linguistics class. I was looking for an elective, blah, 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 blah. I loved linguistics. Again, connection with other languages. The other piece from childhood was that I had loved the idea of translating the Bible. And so linguistics is like a perfect path to the Summer Institute of Linguistics, which is where all the missionaries go to get trained to translate the Bible. So I was studying Arabic. They were like, we're going to Morocco. We're going to go tell Moroccans about Jesus. And I was like, I want to go. And my leaders were like, you need to prove to us that you're staying with Crusade because your sister has left, and don't follow in her footsteps. And I was like, yeah, I will prove it. I will be good. And my parents were like, no, you're not quitting school for a year. And I was like, it's just 1 year. God wants me to, because my leaders were telling me God wanted me to. And they were like, nope, it's not going to happen. So I begged and cried, and, with both my leaders and my parents, it wasn't going to happen. So I figured out how to go study abroad in Spain, which is just a hop, skip, and a jump from Morocco, so that I could go down and visit them and be connected with them. And I felt like desperately heartbroken and depressed about it. But I was like, okay, this is better than nothing. So I was wrapping up my sophomore year, and I was like, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to study in Spain. But my crusade leaders were still like, you need to go on a summer missions trip. If you're not going on stint, like, you need to show Jesus that you are not following your sister's path, and you have, you know, denied Jesus by not going to Morocco on stint. So you need to prove to us that you're going to go on a summer's missions trip. And I was like, okay, I will. I can feel that conversation on the phone with that leader. I can't remember his name right now. Kyle Minnick. And I was like, okay, I'm gonna do it. I will not let Jesus down, right? So I was calling friends, I was trying to figure out what to do, and this girl from my high school who I had feelings for, she had told me that she had gone on a teen mania trip and that it like completely changed her life. And I was like, all right, let's look it up. So I looked it up, teen mania. My parents thought it was a little extreme, which made it feel like an even better choice. My crusade leaders was like, yes, because Acquire the Fire had started becoming really popular. I hadn't ever gone to any Acquire the Fire meetings, but my crusade leaders were happy. My parents were upset, but willing. And all of that was like perfect because I was feeling like my parents had like denied me the right to follow what God wanted, right? So it fit a lot of those criteria. And um, I signed up. I raised like $20,000, ridiculous amount of money, which is, you'll see in the Shiny Happy people, they make so much money. And I shipped myself off to Texas. And within the first few hours, I was like, oh, something else is happening here. I was staying in these barracks, which that is the best word I can use to describe it. They reminded me of in the concentration camps where they have stacked up um, bunks. Um, I have like barely been able to talk about this in therapy because, like I said, the PTSD is real for this one. So we slept in these bunks that were long, hundreds of kids sleeping in them. I was going to be a counselor. So it's high schoolers and then college students are their counselors. And immediately, like when you watch Shiny Happy People season 2, you're gonna hear the motorcycle sound. There was thousands of young people in a stadium type place in the middle of nowhere, Texas. Lights flashing, music blaring, and you hear this super loud motorcycle sound. I mean, they must have had a microphone on it, honestly. Comes up through the center of the aisles. I can feel it vibrating in me still. It was so um, impactful. And this guy, I forget his name now. What's his name? PTSD. Comes up through the center of the stage, and he is super charismatic. People are speaking in tongues, people are crying and passing out. It's hot, it's sweaty, it's loud. It's thousands of people cheering and screaming and crying, and we are going to fight for Jesus and we are going to save the world. And so it's just like so much, definitely a cult, right? So I'm like, I had my little mini Bible that was camouflage because I had this fantasy I used to be pen pals with a missionary in China who smuggled Bibles in, and that is something that Teen Mania did, was smuggle Bibles in, and I had this fantasy about like smuggling my Bible, similarly to Corrie Ten Boom, who I also idolized, who housed Jews with her family during the Holocaust and then hid her personal small Bible as she went into the concentration camps and was able, like, God protected her and the guards didn't see, and she was able to like share Bible verses with other people in it. Anyways, I idolized that story, so I had my little tiny camouflage, it was like literally camouflage print small Bible that I kept with me like around my neck at all times. And I had my Bible with me, and I was like speaking in tongues without interpretation. That is not biblical. So this is just like a biblical concept that I was taught, that if someone's speaking in tongues, that there should also be an interpreter. And there was lots of speaking in tongues, but there was no interpretation. So I went to the leaders like within the first hours and was like, "Hey, why are you doing this?" And then one by one, there were things that I was like, I don't think so. So one of the things was that we were all put into these like teams, and then we were given roles for this like pantomime that was done with music that was very emotional. It was basically the story of Jesus's crucifixion, and they would have us like, you know, 15-hour, 16-hour days out in the sun in Texas, going over these and doing like physical exercises, um, in such a way that like we were not being taken care of physically. It was like harmful for our physical health. We were dehydrated. We didn't have enough food or water. We weren't being given breaks. You know, kids were getting hurt, passing out, having, you know, severe throwing up, digestive problems. And we were being yelled at and told like we were suffering for Christ. And you can see it on the show. I haven't finished the show because it's too much for me to watch, but it is exactly how I remembered it. Um, and I thought it couldn't be the way I remembered it because that would be so wild and seems so illegal, but it's exactly how I remembered it. It physically, emotionally, verbally abusive. And so again, I was there with my Bible going, "Hey, this doesn't line up. Hey, this doesn't line up." So I was already like a concern of the leadership. They were already talking to me about like not questioning authority. So that was when we were still in Texas. Then we got transferred to the Philippines, and we had even less access to food and water. They were giving us only soda and McDonald's. There was McDonald's for breakfast. There was peanut butter and jelly for lunch. And I don't even remember if we had dinner. We weren't allowed to shower for more than 1 minute. We weren't allowed to like wash our clothes. I remember the clothes just being like, you had to wear the same thing every day. It was your costume. It was like crusty. It was, um, very rainy in the Philippines in the summer. So my clothes were like like moldy, because they wouldn't dry overnight because we would sweat them into completely wet, and then they would like not dry, but they had so much salt in them from the sweat that they were like crunchy, but not quite, but like moldy. And so they would like chafe. And they would have us again, like wouldn't get us water, would get us soda, which was like sweet and dehydrating. And I have always been vegetarian, and slash vegan, and they would like force us to eat the food. And so they had like, I remember egg McMuffins that were like it makes me throw up now to think about it. So like, for years I couldn't smell McDonald's. I still don't go to McDonald's. And I had a really hard time with peanut butter smell for a long time. I also have not really been able to go into a place of worship, that's a Christian place of worship since then. Without, I used to have panic attacks if I went in, but it's just uncomfortable for me now. Um, so uh so we were in the Philippines. We were, all day out in the sun, dehydrated, not enough food, resources, getting hurt, yelling at us like, work hard, Jesus wants this. You're showing Jesus that you're like willing to sacrifice to the way that he did. And we weren't doing any service. I had gone on a missions trip when I was in high school that was more service oriented, and that was sort of my whole connection with missions was service. But this was just pure evangelism, just pure converting people. And when we would get back in the night, there would be like 1 minute for brushing your teeth and showering, for example. And I remember I was in charge of three high schoolers. One of my three high schoolers um, took too long brushing her teeth. And they brought the entire group out, like 100 of us, I don't know how many of us, so many, out in the pouring rain at like midnight and had us start doing like calisthenics, physical exercise. And I again got my Bible out and I was like, God, this is just wrong. Like, this is not okay. This child was brushing her teeth. Like, this is unacceptable. And they took me to the side. They told me that I had been basically demon possessed, that Satan was working through me. They they said I had to admit it or I would be punished further, which I was scared for my physical safety. Um, and so I said, okay, Satan's working through me. They took me up to the rooftop in the middle of this storm, and they physically, and this is where my memory goes a little hazy, but my memory is that there was also like sexual abuse involved. Um, there was a group of um, older leaders who were with me up on that roof, casting out demons, beating me with big palm branches and other things that are hazier memories. And we were about halfway through the month at that point. So from then on, I was put in solitary. So I would come out of solitary to do the performances. I was the like Joker person in the play. And I remember that was my pose at the end that I had to like hold. Uh, and then other than that, I had to be in solitary. So when they would go on like group outings or when they would eat, I was kept separate in a room. Um, and I was not allowed to talk to my kids that I had been working with, which they were like terrorized by this experience. So I was really concerned about them because I had been trying to comfort them and encourage them the whole time. And um, they said that I had like too much physical touch with the as they caught me like rubbing one of the girls' backs one night when she was like crying herself to sleep. And I had hugged one of the girls when she like had only a sports bra on. And so there was, I think that was where the like sexual piece came in. I think they were realizing that I was queer. I wasn't having sexual interactions with these girls, but I think that there was like some sort of a connection made. Um, anyway, so I wasn't allowed to touch anybody. I wasn't allowed to talk to anybody. I was kept in isolation. And by the end of the trip, you come back and you have like a debrief time in Texas. And once we got back in Texas, we had access to phones. We didn't have access to phones to call our family. I want to say there was one time when I was allowed to call my family, and I remember just crying the whole time. And I don't know what my parents thought, but eventually they like made me hang up. The Teen Mania people. But once we were back in Texas, we had access to phones. Everyone was allowed to make a phone call. And there was one of the high schoolers who she had grown up an MK, a missionary kid. And so she and I had been talking the whole time because she and I knew the Bible better than any of these leaders did. And so she and I the whole time have been like, this is off. Like this is not the Bible that we know. And so she and I got a chance. Once we got back to Texas, they took me out of solitary because there was thousands of kids and they like sort of just let everybody go back into the milieu. So she and I coordinated to call our parents, and we decided like we are not staying for the week of debrief. We're going to sneak out of this place and we're going to like hitchhike our way back to the airport in Texas. So we both called our parents and we got our parents to change our flights to that day. Or the following day. Then we waited for the leaders because the leaders had possession of all of our passports and they had them in a duffel bag, like under their bunks. So we waited until the night. I snuck out of the like barracks. I snuck into the room of the leaders and like crawled on the ground. I can remember it so specifically. Crawled on the ground, got the duffel bag out, went through, found our two passports, crawled out. We walked on the road, the like dusty, with our suitcases, the dusty Texas road, because it's in the literal middle of nowhere until we saw a bus. Um, we got on the bus. The bus stopped at um, a gas station. And I remember I went into the gas station. I've got this high schooler with me, right? Like, I'm like, ugh, I don't know, so crazy. I stopped at a gas station. I got her a pickle because that's like what she really wanted was this, you know, big pickle, sour pickle. And I got like red vines, I think. And I remember getting back onto that bus with that pickle for her and those red vines for me and feeling like I was the most powerful person on the planet, that I had just freed us. And the whole time we were on the bus, I was scared that they were going to figure it out and find us. We got to the airport. Um, and at the, where you go for the check in, like she needed to go to a different terminal for um, her airline was different terminal than mine. And I didn't know if she was going to make it on that flight. I didn't know if it was going to work, if she was going to be okay. It was the middle of the night by the time we got there. The flights were the next day. It was like late in the evening or something. And uh, I never saw her again. So I hope, Brittany, wherever you are, that you are safe and well loved and that you have gotten care and resources after that experience. But I said goodbye to her and I just prayed that she would be okay. And then I went to my terminal and I slept on a bench. And I remember going into the bathroom and using like an entire roll of toilet paper because we had had no toilet paper the whole time. They used bucket flushes. And I was so happy about the toilet paper. I slept on the little bench. I remember the guy in the middle of the night vacuuming around me and being like, "Are you okay?" And I was like, "I am fabulous. I'm free." I got back to San Diego and I just kind of made light of it. I was like, I think it was bad, but I'm okay. Because that's shiny, happy people. That's sort of how we dealt with everything. I must have conveyed something because I did end up having a therapist appointment that week. Um, and I was supposed to go like right back to college, like within a week after I got back. Yeah, right back to college within a couple of weeks of getting back from there. And somebody must have had enough concern to get me a therapist appointment, which I appreciate. I got into that therapist appointment, and I remember this woman saying to me, "Yeah, you're not okay. Like, you can't go back to college. You are going to have severe PTSD, and you need to have therapy like every day. Like, you need to be in an outpatient or an inpatient or see me every day for several weeks. Like you're not okay." And I was like, that doesn't sound like the program that we do. So I was like, no, I'm okay. And this is what it was. I wasn't supposed to go back to college. I was supposed to go to Spain. I like, and there was like in between that week, I was supposed to go to Hawaii with my family on vacation. So I was like, nope, I'm going to Hawaii and then I'm going straight from Hawaii or something. I can't remember. It was like ridiculously like straight from Hawaii to Spain for a semester. So I was like, nope, I'm not going to do therapy. I'm not going to have PTSD. I'm going to be just fine. I'm not going to tell anybody that it was what it was. And I'm just going to pretend it was great. And I'm going to go to Hawaii. And I went to Hawaii. And I have no memories of Hawaii, of course. And then I went to Spain, and I have just a very few memories of Spain. I did get to go to Morocco, and it was magical. I have never felt more connected or at home or right in the world as I did when I was in Morocco, but I spent basically the whole week with this incredible Muslim family. Um, and then I had my semester in Spain. I remember crying myself to sleep. I remember wandering around. I remember being like, why am I so depressed? But now I'm like, oh, babe, you had PTSD. Got back to college and continued to be depressed. Um, Ended up senior year living with some women's basketball players, and finally they were, like all openly queer. Well, half of them were openly queer, and half of them were like 9/11 happened, and so half of them were like, I'm committing my life to Jesus because of 9/11, and Jesus is going to save me from being gay. And the one who like super did that was the one I like fell for, and so I was deeply suicidal and just like tragic, and really proud of myself that I got myself to the on campus therapist and asked for therapy, and said, I don't want my parents to know. And so that I really appreciate that psychiatrist who ended up seeing me sort of off the books so that I could not have to tell my family about it, and ended up coming out to her. And she was able to tell me that her sister was queer and that like it's okay and there's other forms of spirituality. And she played a hugely important role in my life. Unfortunately, she also prescribed me antidepressants, which increased my suicidality, which they didn't really know at that point that young people in their 20s can become way more suicidal with antidepressants. So I became way more suicidal and then ended up overdosing within the year. But it took me over a decade uh, to actually talk about the Philippines with anyone. And I still was really questioning myself. About 2 years ago, I decided to Google it. I hadn't even been able to Google it in all that time. So, like 20 years later, I was able to Google it. And I did see that Teen Mania had been shut down. And Ron, right? That's his name. Um, had been, they'd tried to arrest him, put out a warrant for his arrest, and tried to shut it down as a child abuse cult. So I was like, okay, I make sense, but I still wasn't totally sure. I still thought that my memories were extreme and made up. And then just this month, when I turned on that Shiny Happy People season two, because when I watched the season one, I was like, oh yeah, we weren't quite the Duggars. Like I'm kind of like that, but not really. I still was like questioning myself, right? Like, oh, you didn't really have it, but I really had it. I really had all of that, and it is so fucking amazing to me that I have built the life that I'm currently living, given that I came through that. I'm so proud of myself. I'm so grateful for the many resources that have helped me create a new life for myself, one that is really worth living. And when that season two came on and I heard that motorcycle, I was like, oh, yep, yep, that's what happened to me. That is real. All my memories are real. And it was as extreme as I remember. And so I'm super, super, super grateful for the people who have talked about it, have shared about it, have been willing to go, be on a show like that. So thank you to all of you. And to anyone that doubts themselves or has memories that feel traumatic, my therapist told me something once that meant so much to me. It does not matter if it really happened or not. What matters is you feel like it happened. And if you feel like it happened, then it happened because our imagination is experienced by our physical bodies as real. And so if you have anything that feels traumatic to you, then it is traumatic to you, and you deserve to be taken gentle care of and given all of the love and support around that experience, no matter what. So I believe you. I care about you. And if you are on this path of trying to understand why it has been so hard for you to be a person after experiencing evangelical Christianity in your life. You make sense. You are not alone, and we are lucky that people are talking about it. So connect with that show if you'd like to. If it feels too triggering, then don't. And I love you so much.